Dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Emilia Dajuk, and I'm a membership manager at Global Waste Cleaning Network, GWCN, and it's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you on behalf of GWCN, and together with Ms. Rachel Dardis, Environmental Research Director, we will be hosting this webinar today. And before we start, I'd like to introduce you GWCN. It's a global waste cleaning network. It is an international non-profit network comprised of NGOs, educational institutions, and private and public companies that are active and interested in environmental issues related to the management and reduction of waste, whether it's solid, liquid, or gaseous. GWCN's main goal is to protect, preserve, and improve the environment for the benefit of mankind. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that GWCN includes also a research center and an associated journal served by PhDs and other academic and professionals from around the world, researching and writing articles about 20 areas of specialization, either globally or with focus on specific geographical regions and countries. And we are delighted to have you with us to participate and share at the webinar, which is called Confused by Light, Light Pollution and its Consequences on Animals. To begin with, I'd like to ask you all a question. When was the last time when you saw a sky full of stars? I'm sure many of us have experienced life in megapolises or smaller cities. And some people have forgotten what the night sky should look like. And there are those who have never seen it in their entire life. Intense megapolis lightning literally turns night into day, but is it really good for living creatures? For billions of years, life on Earth has relied on day-night rhythm to govern life-sustaining behaviors. And nights, especially moonless nights, were dark. However, in the past 150 years, human urbanization has transformed our nocturnal landscape so that now more than 1/3 of human population is no longer able to see the Milky Way. And everything you can see in the sky is a maximum couple of stars. Between 2012 and 2016, our planet brightened by 9.1%, and it keeps expanding every year by 6%. Of many ways Earth is polluted, light pollution may be the least talked about. However, it's not an illusion. Astronomers measure it from 1 to 9 on the Bortle scale. Artificial light at night has a disruptive and even deadly effect on many species. Wildlife, birds, animals, insects have their nocturnal patterns disrupted. Artificial light can interrupt vegetative growth of plants, disturb communication between fireflies, misdirect movement of turtles, or result in birds chore starting earlier. For example, the turtle's hatchling's instinct to follow the light of the moon in order to reach the sea is intercepted by the light of inland cities, and many of them will never find a way to the ocean. Luckily, specialists, researchers, and parties concerned help increase the awareness of light pollution, thereby fostering its solution. And today's prominent speaker, Dr. Martyna Syposz, is a researcher and contributor to addressing problems of light pollution. Dr. Martyna Syposz is a Polish zoology scientist, and she concluded a PhD at Oxford University, where she explored the effects of light pollution of migrating seabirds. In the upcoming presentation, we will learn about the impact of light pollution on wildlife, explore different ways in which light pollution might affect animals, with focus on seabirds, as well as we'll discover the ways to improve our outdoor lights to diminish the impact of light pollution on organisms. And now I'd like to pass the word to Dr. Martyna, and I'd like to ask Atul to spotlight Dr. Martyna.
I'm very, very happy to tell you a little bit about the light pollution and its consequences to the animals. This session is going to be divided into 3 sessions. First, we are going to listen about light pollution and its effects on the range of organisms. Then we are going to look in details into the effects of the light pollution on the grounding of shearwaters and petrels. These birds I studied during my PhD, so we are going to try to look into the factors that affects the number of grounded seabirds. And finally, we are going to talk about how to monitor the light pollution and how to diminish its negative effects. All these 3 parts are going to be interrupted by a Q&A session, so I will be very happy to take any questions about each of the short parts. So first of all, I want to tell you that there is a lot of research going on right now. It expanded over past 20 years, and every year there is new species, new ways in which light pollution is affecting the organisms. Most organisms are adapted to the normal cycle of sun, of moon, and of the stars. They rely on the cues like color, intensity, the start and end, or the position of all those stellar objects. And they adjust their behavior and their ecology towards these cues. But right now we can see that the light pollution is affecting actually most of the life of the animals. Sanders et al. And colleagues in 2021, so this year, divided effects of light pollution into 5 different categories. So light pollution can affect animals on their individual level, so it can affect the gene expression, the hormone levels, immune response, and stress response. It can change its size, predation risk, cognition, feeding, but also it can start and end the activity earlier or later. In some places, the light up areas change the abundance and diversity of the animals. Today, throughout this first part, I would like to talk about the different animals that are affected by the light pollution, those that are most commonly known. And I was wondering, what is your first thought when you think about, effects of light pollution on animals? Which animal would you think of first? You can share your thoughts in a chat. I thought that maybe it's a moth, because most of the time we would meet a moth in a garden or at the windowsill when it's coming to our light. So there is a huge decline of moths around Britain by 22% over past 50 years. Some of the species of the moths adjust their angle to the light. If the light is far away, like stars or moon, that means that the moth will fly in a straight direction. But if the light is very close, the moth is starting to spiral towards the light, and it's trapped in the halo of the light. It is estimated that in this way, 1/3 of all the animals, under the insects that come to the halo of the light will die because they are eaten or out of exhaustion. But some moths actually adapt and evolve. So in 2016, there was a published paper about ermine moth by Altermat and Ebert. The researchers took small eggs of the ermine moths from the countryside and from the city, put it into laboratory, and then allow them to develop. So when they were after they developed, they checked if the moths is coming to the light or not. So the moths, the city moths, were less likely to come to the light than those that were from the countryside. So while it is good from the individual perspective, and it's probably good for the for those some of those moths, it also means that the habitat for this moth is starting to be fragmented. Another very well-known insect are glowworms. So fireflies actually are can use bioluminescent flashes to communicate to the male that the female is in this spot, and it can be that over 45 meters, but the light pollution actually disturbs this communication, resulting in massive declines in of the fireflies, and most of the glowworms are actually endangered or vulnerable, as listed on the red list. So another animal that is affected by the light are bats. Bats are very well known for their echolocation abilities, but they can also see. So if the bat roost is next to the light pollution, the bats are looking outside and they're thinking, oh, it's not dark enough for me to go out. And then when they wait and wait and they get desperate to eat, finally they go out. But it's not the good time for them anymore, because the time when the most of the insects went outside already has passed. So there is a massive decline again in bats population because of it as well. Other bats are coming to the light pollution actually because they want to exploit the fact that lots of insects are coming to the light. But there are also those bats that are slow moving, and those bats are avoiding the light pollution. So again, in here, their habitat would be very fragmented. I think one of the most researched animal are birds, especially those migrating birds. The first research or reports were done in California. They showed that the lighthouses the light from lighthouses can result in collisions of those birds, and people collected 12 dead birds from the lighthouse every night. So since then, obviously, the light has spread, and it's not a surprise that right now we have a lot more research about migrating birds and the effects of light pollution on them. One of them is by Benjamin Van Doren, that looked at the National September 11 Memorial and Museum tribute in night. It lit up very brightly during the night, and Benjamin and colleagues used the weather radar to actually estimate how many birds are attracted to this light pollution. And they found that there can be 20 times more birds in that area because of the light being turned on. You can see from this graph that in 2015, during the autumn migration, there was only 500 birds within 5-kilometer area, but 20 minutes later, only 20 minutes later, when they turned on the lights, there were 15,700 birds in that area. Right now, there is a massive decline reported in USA by 28%. The birds are declining by 8% since 1970. So clearly there is some kind of a problem with population of migratory birds, and it is thought that one of the reasons is actually light pollution. So right now, I also wanted to tell you a little bit about us. Are we affected by this light pollution problem? And it seems that yes, there are some health effects of over-illumination or improper spectral composition that may include headaches, anxiety, increased stress, or worker fatigue. In 2007, WHO actually decided that shift work that involved changes in the our day and night shifts reasons are resulting in higher chance of getting a cancer. There has been a lot of research done into this, and they found that the shift workers are more likely to get prostate and breast cancer. And there was another study in South Korea, showing that actually higher light intensity results in higher chance of getting breast cancer. So the light pollution does not affect animals only in the negative way. There are some animals that actually can exploit the light pollution. So as I mentioned, bats, for example, are coming to the lit up areas to eat a prey that comes to the light too. It's more visible. There is higher quantities of it, so it's good for them. Similarly, spiders, cane toads, shorebirds, storks, lots of other animals are exploiting the light pollution in this way. But while it is it may be good for the predators, it might be very detrimental for the prey populations. That can, result in the local extinction or decrease in the population of those animals. So there are some animals, like, for example, mayfly, that rely on the polarization from the water. But similar polarization is coming from the lit up asphalt. So mayflies are laying eggs in the water by using this cue, but sometimes it happens that they lay on the asphalt because of the lit up asphalt and polarization from there. So some researchers from Hungary actually decided to make sure that mayflies are going to stay on the river by using a very powerful beacons. And while it might be a little bit counterintuitive to fight light pollution problem with more light pollution, it actually worked. Mayflies only live for 24 hours, so they don't have too much time to lay their eggs. So it's very good that they stayed in the right place. Similar solution has been found with fish, for example. Fish are attracted towards the light, so they're to cross the dams. They're coming. Researchers are lighting up the special ladders for them to cross the dams, and also in some places where there are dispersing mountain lions, villages use light pollution as a deterrent, because mountain lions actually avoid light pollution. So this is a whole list of lots of different species, but this is definitely not the full list of all the organisms that are affected by the light pollution. And while some effects of the light pollution might be positive, most of them unfortunately are negative. There is it has been estimated that 60% of nocturnal invertebrates and 30% of nocturnal invertebrates might be potentially affected by the light pollution. So while this list of the organisms, the list of the organisms that are affected by the light pollution is expanding every year, included but not restricted to those that I written down in here. So this was our first part of the presentation. In the next part, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the effects of the light pollution on shearwater and petrels and their grounding. And then I'm going to talk more about the monitoring of the light pollution and diminishing effect of the light. So during this questions part of the session, please remember about the fact that I'm going to expand on those subjects. Thank you. And I will pass on to Rachel and Emilia.
Thank you, Martyna, for such an informative section of your presentation. I'd like to now ask our audience with us today, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or ask questions in the chat, and we can go through each one with you all. So for while we wait on people to prepare their questions, I have one question for you, Martyna. I know you mentioned that research first began into light pollution about 20 years ago, but when was the problem first recognized? What were the pioneers of these observations?
Yeah, so I think the light pollution problem started to emerge when during 1918 when actually the first reports about the birds been highlighted about the fact that, you know, the lighthouses are attracting the birds and result in their collisions. But really, the research about light pollution is very, very new. Only, you know, over past 30 years, we started to look into this subject a little bit more. So there is a lot of research about turtles with Salamorlard, or about seabirds with Rodriguez, but these are definitely newer over past 20-30 years researches.
Okay, that's very interesting. And you speak about both the negative and positive effects of light pollution on both animals and humans. In your opinion, is the average person at home, for example, aware of these effects? Based on your experience and perception, are many people aware of such negative outcomes on light pollution on all animals?
Yeah, so I don't really think that everybody is thinking often about the fact that light pollution might negatively affect animals. I think that people think about some species, but not a lot of them. So I think we should definitely voice the problem a little bit louder, so we know more about it and public knows more about it.
Of course, yeah. So I believe we have a question from Yes Environmental Company.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good evening. It's evening in India. So I am a part of Yes Environment Company, and we are a company in Afghanistan. Actually, I was curious, like, will this light pollution be completely effective upon the eggs of the fishes? Will it harm, or will it what effect is it gonna give out? I was curious about this.
Yeah, so my main research is in seabirds. So specifically about the eggs of fish, I would have to check if there is any effect. But I know that, for example, some scientists are using a light to draw larvae of the fish towards the corals. So, you know, maybe there will be some effect on the eggs too. We would have to look into that.
Okay, so the reproduction chain is not being damaged or being harmed with this technique. Okay, it is supportive for the attraction and keeping these larvae away from the predators, but will it lead to further damage of their reproduction chain?
Well, I guess it's possible, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure about fish. Sorry.
Okay, it's okay. No, thank you. I was just curious about it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your question. That was great. Does anyone else have any further questions? I suppose while we wait, I have another question. So does artificial light affect pollution's behavior? If it does, then do you think that ecosystems are also in danger, such as bees, bumblebees, and other pollinators might be kept away from visiting flowers, reducing pollination?
Yeah, so there is some research into attraction of some insects towards light pollution, including the insects that pollinate during the night. So definitely there can be some big problems because of the fact that nocturnal pollinators are disturbed by the light pollution. I think there is very little research into the whole ecosystems. That's like a big problem. We focus on this small increments, but we don't really know how the whole ecosystem is reacting towards the light pollution, and more research into that is necessary.
Very interesting. So I also have a question about adaptation. Has there been any previous research that suggests that these animals have been adapting to light pollution? If not, how quickly are the populations of these animals that are affected by light pollution going to decline if something isn't done right away?
Yeah, so except from this moth, this ermine moth that I was mentioning about, I don't really think that there is much more research showing that animals evolve to the life with the light pollution. They most of the time really just avoid it, or yeah, come to the light and suffer all these consequences. I think there is a lot of decline right now in the birds population, bats population. So maybe that will also drive the evolution, but will it be quick enough for them to adapt to this tremendous changes over past 150 years? Yeah, I don't know. Be interesting to research.
Amelia, did you put up your hand? Did you have something to say? Amelia, can you hear us okay? Okay. I suppose just while we wait, a further on question. With a technology grow, do a lot of things with lightning we should not know about. We're seeing rapid market transformation from HPS to LED, so that now it's possible to see a 5,000 to 6,000 Kelvin products, making it rather aggressive than useful. Do you think aggressive LED lightning can have not only disruptive but even deadly effects on many species?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very big problem, that lots of people are choosing LEDs. They are very, very good because, they are reducing the cost of the whole electricity, right? They use a lot less electricity than sodium bulbs, metal halide, or any other. But the problem is that while we are choosing the LEDs, we are choosing also the wide full spectrum of the LED light, and that is very big mistake, because that means that it will affect a lot more animals. So I think it would be great if we start to choose the warm other spectra of the LED lights, because it is possible. It's possible to have an LED in any color that you want. So I think we should start thinking about changing our mindset to actually choose not full white color of the light, but the more warm colors of the light pollution.
Oh, thank you, Martina. I have one clarification. So with regard to what you have just said regarding the spectrum, so is that true that, is that really so that the, let's say, yellow spectrum is seen as more friendly than the blue, which is seen more aggressive, and it is widely used in LED lighting currently?
Yeah, so the problem is that sodium lights are focused on the red color mainly. It doesn't mean it's completely red. It just focuses more on red and yellow and less on blue. With LEDs, we have most of the time either a full spectrum or full lights, which means that they would focus on the blue light more than red. So I will talk about it a little bit later, but yes, lots of different animals have a different perception. So it's hard to say, okay, choose this color, this will be perfect for everyone, you know. So you have to think about which animals are more endangered in this specific area. But in general, it is, I think, a general consensus that warm lights, the lights that have more red and yellow colors, like you said, are better for the environment than those that are focused on the blue and green color.
Thank you so much, Martina.
Does anyone else have any questions from our chat, from our audience in the chat, or else you can ask live by putting up your hand before we move on to the next section?
Yes, you can post questions in the chat. You can raise your hand and come online. We will be waiting for a couple of minutes, just taking into consideration that it can be some lag or little bit troubles with connection. So we are waiting for a couple of minutes for you to ask questions, if you have something to ask. Because the first part of this presentation was really enlightening, and it was very interesting, and the answers that Dr. Martyna just shared with us, it was really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so I believe if anyone, if we don't have any questions to ask, we can move to the next section. And the questions, those people who wanted to ask questions but didn't have such chance now, you can actually ask them during our final Q&A session, which is going to be at the end of the presentation. Oh, we have a question. Since that the study has looked into issues pertaining to light pollution, has there ever been a chance of looking into the pollution prevention measures? If any, which one so far? This is in reference to those habitats close to developing areas, which I presume may alter the environment.
Yeah, so definitely there are some examples of people trying to protect animals. And one of the examples is from Hawaii, actually, where they covered the upward spill of the light pollution. So I guess that was already in a place where the development was there, so it wasn't for newly developed places. The other example is from the oil platform. They decided to change the colors of the oil platform to completely green. And they reported that less birds were coming to that area during the migration. So certainly there are some examples of people trying to protect animals from the light pollution, but they're very local, very small, and I think we have to implement legislation at a little bit bigger scale. I hope that answers your questions.
So we
Thank you.
We have a question from Dan Diaz. So urbanization really displaced them. What can be done to restore or have any habitats to them?
To the animals that are affected by the light pollution, yeah?
I believe
Yes, I
so.
believe this. The question, I believe, as I see the question, is that that the urbanization affected the displacement, affected the displacement of natural habitats of the species, but unfortunately, then Diaz haven't specified which species.
I guess the ones that are affected by the light pollution. So yeah, I mean, this is a problem with not only light pollution, with just you know, cutting down trees or changing the forest or any other habitat into farmland or a city or a village. So obviously there should be those safe havens that are protected areas, but right now there is actually quite a lot of light pollution in those areas too, because nobody is thinking about the fact that light pollution may negatively affect the animals there. So I think this is another big step that we have to take into account. We have to make sure that our protected areas are also protected from the light pollution, and we do not.
We have one more question. Thank you, Martyna. There's one more question. There is a possibility that the predators can lose their prey due to light pollution and end up being starved. Are there any of the studies which gives evidence of this? Are there any specific species?
Like, I'm trying to think of an example. So I don't think there is any study looking into that. You know, normally the study would look into the fact, okay, so there was a habitat perfect for fireflies or perfect for some other insects, and right now they are gone. But nobody would think, oh, wait a second, but if the fireflies are gone or other insects are gone because of the light pollution, how does it affect the other animals? I don't think there is any study like that. And like I said before, there is very little study about the whole effects of light pollution on ecosystem. Clearly, we need to get to know more. So this is a very good question. I like this, but I really cannot think of any example on top of my head. So maybe more research is needed.
Thank you, Martyna. If no one else has any other questions, perhaps at this stage, we can move on to the next section of the presentation.
Yes, okay. So, all right, let me come back to my presentation. Can you still see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So right now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the order Procellariiformes. These are seabirds that travel across all the oceans and seas of the world. They range in size from small 20 grams storm petrels to large 11 kilograms albatrosses. They live on offshore and oceanic islands. And they are also the most endangered group of birds, with their status quickly deteriorating. So Procellariiformes have webbed feet, long wingspan, and feet situated far back in their body. So they are amazing travelers above the oceans. But unfortunately, that also means that they are quite clumsy on the ground. That's why some of the species, such as Manx shearwater presented in here, actually come to visit their colony during the night to avoid predation. So let me take you right now to a burrow of a Manx shearwater, because they do dig burrows where they lay their eggs. The Manx shearwaters mature when they are around 6-7 years old. They live up to 57 years. They normally come to their natal colony. So that means that they will come to more or less the same place where they were born in, and then they choose their partner, typically for their whole life. When the female lays an egg in April or May, they start to alternate during the incubation and then during the chick rearing too. Parents feed their chick up to 1.5 times of the size of the parent, and after that they leave their chick and they let it a little bit get hungry, and finally the chick is going out for the migration. Where do they go? We actually don't really know. We know where the adults are going. We put small geolocator devices on the legs of Manx shearwaters. That research was done by Guilford and colleagues in 2008, and we've seen that they were traveling all the way to South Atlantic. That means that this whole trip from UK to South Atlantic and back is around 20,000 kilometers a year. Over lifespan, it's 50 times that. So that means that the average Manx shearwater goes all the way to the moon and back, and all the way to the moon again and back. So that's 1 million kilometers. It's amazing, amazing journey. So those little devices are actually not that precise. The geolocators are precise only to 150 kilometers. So you may see some dots in here coming over the land, but this is not true. Manx shearwaters are only traveling over the ocean. Some birds, especially juvenile birds, unfortunately are having the problem of the light pollution. As mentioned before, they're quite clumsy on the land, so they need a gust of wind or a long runway to take off again. But cars, buildings, and other structures form a barrier. So if a Manx shearwater or any shearwater or petrel is not helped, they are vulnerable to dehydration, starvation. They can be eaten by a cat or a wild or domestic animal. There are also some reports of them being hit by a car. That's why there is a lot of organization, rescue campaigns, and volunteers that actually help shearwaters and petrels, collect them.
Esto no tiene nada que ver si son machos, hembras, la estación.
And put them, back to the sea.
Could you please, excuse me, could everyone please double check that your mics are muted? Thank you. Sorry, Dr. Martyna, for interruption. We shall wait a couple of minutes. Yeah. So I think it's fine now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So yes, and I was very lucky that I met actually one of the volunteers, Martin Carty, who collected a lot of data from 2009 about grounding of Manx shearwaters in Malek. So let me show you where Malek is. It is a small village located in west of Scotland. It is near to Isle of Rum. This is the second largest colony of Manx shearwaters in the world, with 76,000 pairs of Manx shearwaters breeding there. Most of them breed high up in the mountains to avoid predation from rats. And if you cut the top of the mountain or in Rum, you will realize that it looks a little bit like a Swiss cheese because of all these teeny tiny burrows of Manx shearwaters. So during the night, when the Manx shearwater are coming to Rum, it's actually extremely loud. They are very, very noisy birds. And in September, when juveniles are ready to for their migration.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Martyna, to cut across you. I believe we're having a problem with the presentation slides. Is it possible that you could reshare them?
Yeah,
they
sure.
don't seem to be moving along. I think they're stuck on this slide we had before the Q&A period.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Let me.
My apologies for interrupting you.
Yeah, no problem.
There, yes, I believe we can see them now. Emilia, can you see them?
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Yes, I think it's much better.
Cool.
Just, yeah, now it's good. Now it's good. Yes, we can continue. Thank you so much.
No worries. So in September, some of the juveniles are coming to my lake, and they are somehow confused by the light pollution, and they ground them there. So there is a volunteer who, at least one, who goes around my lake and collects those birds, put them into well-ventilated boxes, and leave them for the night. The next morning, they are ringing the birds, they're measuring them, weighing, and then releasing them back to the sea on the ferry. So before, it was actually done from the coast of Scotland, but girls quickly learned that Manx shearwaters are released in that location, and they were actually chasing Manx shearwaters and killing them. So there was a decision made to move the release to the ferry, which is now very successful. So with use of a probabilistic model, I look at different factors affecting the number of grounding Manx shearwaters. I look at the moon luminescence and weather conditions, and I found that actually year was the most important variable affecting the number of Manx shearwaters grounding. It is we don't really know why it's happening. There has been reports in other research showing that the time of the peak fledging or productivity of the colony can affect the number of the groundings, but you know, we don't know if it's actually maybe the number of the fish around my lake or something like that. We don't have enough data to put that into our model. But we know that the moonluminescence affects the grounding of Manx shearwaters in my lake very strongly. So you can see in here the yellow line is showing the moon intensity, and black dots are the number of grounded Manx shearwaters in my lake for every day of September in each of these years. So you can see that less light pollution, less of the moon intensity results in higher grounding of Manx shearwater. It has been explained by the fact that strong moon actually results in a higher ambient light, resulting in smaller, lesser attraction of shearwaters towards the lit up areas. Another important factors that appeared in our model was wind direction. It doesn't happen often that wind actually is an important factor for grounding of shearwaters and petrels. This is because most of the time the lit up area is already on the island where there is the colony of the seabirds, but in here we found that wind blowing from the seabirds colony towards Malek, towards lit up area, results in the higher number of grounded seabirds. It is probably because inexperienced young birds are buffeted by the wind towards the lit up area. So if you want to find a shearwater or a petrel grounded somewhere, you would have to go to lit up area near to their nesting ground during the fledging season. It is the best to go there during the moonless night with the wind blowing from the colony towards the lit up area. And probably you will need a little bit of luck too. So despite all these tips, all this information that we already have about the light pollution affecting the shearwaters and petrels, we still don't actually know what is causing their grounding. So the literature offers us a lot of different examples, and I splitted them into two different categories. So in one way, that shearwaters could come to the light pollution because they think that it's a prey. So some shearwaters and petrels exploit bioluminescent prey, and they can associate the light with the bioluminescent prey. But Manx shearwaters are actually diurnal birds. They spend most of their life foraging during the day, and they really come to their colony only during the night. So I don't really think that's a good answer for our question. The second possibility is that light pollution affects their navigation. So strong light can actually override the light from the stars, moons, and other stellar objects. And Manx shearwaters and shearwaters and petrels in general might be confused by this or use light pollution as an incorrect navigational cue. So right now I want to tell you a little bit about turtles. So small hatchling turtles go out from their nest during the night, and they need to get to the sea as quickly as possible. This is their safe haven because outside they're very vulnerable to predation. So it is much better for them to be in the water. They direct their movement towards the sea using the cues of the brightness of the horizon and the elevation of the horizon. They go to the lowest, brightest point on the horizon. For millennia, that meant that it was sea, because sea reflects the light while land is absorbing the light. But recently, because of our light pollution, right now, actually, the coast is more lit up in some areas than the sea, and turtles are getting confused and going to the cities and towns near to their nesting sites. So Manx shearwaters, if they were using the same cue, that would mean that they would also go to the sea, where they are much safer than on the land. Like I said, they're quite clumsy on the land. But that would also mean that they could get confused by the light pollution. What is also very interesting is that adult turtles, the female adult turtles, are avoiding lit up areas when they're choosing their nesting site, and adult shearwaters and petrels can avoid light pollution at their colony. So there are some similarities between those groups of organisms. So I would like to leave you with a message that the problem with shearwaters and petrels, it's not limited to UK. It's happening all around the world, and there is 56 out of 113 nocturnal burrow nesting shearwater and petrels already reported that they are affected by the light pollution. There are 24 threatened shearwaters and petrels affected by the light pollution, and there are some indications that light pollution may result in the decline in the population. There is also around 7 different species grounding in Tenerife, and there has been 30,000 birds rescued in Hawaii over past 30 years. So right now I would like to take you to the next part. I'm going to chat a little bit more about the monitoring and diminishing the effects of the light pollution, but let's have a small break for any questions that you might have. I will pass over to Emilia and Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you, Martyna. This was really impressive data that you have just shared with us. And I encourage everyone to ask questions if you have. And I guess I will start whilst everyone is preparing for that. I already have a question. So in relation to your methods of gathering your data, you spoke about secure campaigns with groups of volunteers searching for grounded birds in order to bring them back to the sea. So how successful was this in terms of decreasing the decline of the population due to grounding? And were you able to compare this to the years prior to 2009? And if successful, do you think other regions could implement this program? Could it be successful globally?
Yeah, so this is quite a compound question. So first of all, Manx shearwaters are actually not declining. So Manx shearwaters are very safe. They are least concern species. They're all good. There is only around 50 to 130. There was this 2012 year with 600 birds grounding in Malek, but comparing to around 70,000 young birds, it's really a teeny tiny proportion of the Manx shearwaters that are affected by the lights of Malek. So you could say that it's a really small problem and why we even care about it. But like I'm saying, there's a lot of other shearwaters and petrels that are threatened and endangered. So we have to make sure that those birds are safe. And one of the ways of doing it is by diminishing the light pollution. So my research shows that we can choose the dates when we can, turn off the light or at least, lower the light intensity. We can decide, okay, today is a new moon, today the wind is blowing from the direction of the colony, so let's make sure that there is no additional light pollution, that the lights are diminished or the party is not happening. There has been also reports of some parties or some lit up areas that are affecting the grounding of seabirds. So I think if we take that into account, if we take into account the fact that, there are some days that it's more likely to find a lot of grounded seabirds, we actually can make a good template to start to work towards the diminishing of light pollution.
Thank you. Thank you, Martyna. In your research, you stated that the two most important variables determining the amount of grounding they are the year and the moon. So you also mentioned that higher breeding success and peak fledging date can also be associated with fallout. Can you discuss this some more? And could this also be influenced by light pollution?
So when it comes to the peak fledging date, this is very much influenced by the light pollution. So, but the light from the moon and not from actually the lamps. So basically, if the peak fledging dates is during the period when there is new moon, that means there will be a lot more seabirds actually grounding than during the period when it would be the other way around. So in some years during the peak fledging season can be full moon, so most of the birds are fine and they are just going away on their road. But during the years when there is a new moon and the peak fledging date coincide with this, then that means that there will be a little bit of a bigger problem. With the productivity, I don't think that there is much connection. There's just more birds basically fledging, resulting in more birds grounding. So this is the way that would work, I believe.
Thank you. We have questions in the chat. Can light pollution have a negative effect on animal reproduction?
Yes, there is definitely some research into that. There is, I think, a limited number of the diminished number of the offsprings in some areas of the light pollution. But which species was it? I cannot remember right now. But definitely, yes, I completely agree. This is one way. But the other way is also that some birds are actually starting their nesting season earlier because of the light pollution. So in lit up areas, they can start earlier than those birds that are away from lit up areas. So this is another way in which light pollution may affect the reproduction.
Yes, this was a question from Mina Nabizada, by the way. And the next question from Yes Environmental Company is related to the previous one. So Yes Environmental Company is asking, as of turtles, there are crabs too who nest on the shores. Is there population variation in them too due to light pollution?
When it comes to crabs, I cannot remember any research about crabs being affected by the light pollution. But since they are nocturnal and since they are, are on coastal areas where there can be light pollution, probably their activity regime, like when they are waking up, when they are going to sleep, when they are starting feeding, is probably affected by the light. But I think I cannot remember any research that I could cite right now.
Okay, thank you so much. One more question in the chat from Luis Delgado. But these strategies work on islands or single towns, but in bigger cities, which will be the approach to prevent the fallings of fledglings?
That's an interesting question. Thank you very much, Luis. So I think we would have to take a similar approach towards the bigger cities too. We would have to also use some ways to diminish the light pollution to ensure that shearwaters and petrels are not coming to those areas. I don't think, I don't think there is any other better option than just to try to ensure that the light is lower in cities, in towns, in villages. You don't have to turn off the light. That's the whole point. It's enough to cover it, to make sure it's going to the right place. It doesn't have to go to the sea. It has to stay on the land where we actually need it. And then I think this kind of framework can work anywhere,
Yes. Yes. Another question in the chat. Rachel, could you please bring this question to us?
Yes, so this question comes from EE2387. Was there a reason as to why the birds had to be weighed, and how does this relate to light pollution? Could it be because their eating habits changed due to standard lighting, or determined factors?
Yes, this is a very interesting question. There was a study about actually the different condition of the shearwaters during the grounding, showing that actually over the grounding periods, the birds were becoming, they weighed less. So this is probably because of the fact that the birds that are staying the longest on the island, on the colony, they are probably weighing also much less. And another research would have to look into, what's the condition on the colony, and compare it to the condition of the birds on the during the grounding, those that were grounded. But this is definitely a very, very good question and something to look into.
Thank you. One more question. So your research measured populations and fallout in Malay. However, could your methods and results be seen or replicated across different regions?
Yes, I think definitely that could be possible. The probabilistic model could work in other places too. Other research also look into similar factors and effects. Like I mentioned, there is actually one study with showing that the wind also affects the number of the grounded seabirds. It's in Australia. There is one study in St Kilda in Scotland. So yeah, definitely in Tenerife and Hawaii. So there is a lot of other research that shows similar effects of different factors on the number of the grounded seabirds. But the approach that I've taken could be used in other places too.
Thank you. One more question. Are there any confounding variables or limitations to your research, and can this be controlled in future studies?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there could be some improvements done. Definitely, it is a citizen science study, so really there is. Nobody looked in detail when it comes to like how much work effort has been done, or are we looking at the right areas? Should we look in some other places too? Maybe on some days when there is one Manx shearwater, somebody will go to bed quickly, and that's why they are not collecting more Manx shearwaters. And on days when there is a lot of birds, you just carry on because you are so excited, you want to go on. So definitely that is a problem and something that we could improve. A systematic survey is not so exciting, but it would be something to improve my study, yes.
Thank you, Martyna. A very interesting question is that, are non-migrating birds also affected by light pollution? Like, for instance, pigeons or city birds, or they got used to this phenomenon?
Yeah, so I know that the choir of the birds is starting earlier. So definitely birds that are singing in the morning are affected by the light pollution. I heard that the hormones of the animals that live in the cities are also affected. But how feral pigeons are affected by the light pollution? I know that I listed them, so definitely I've already seen some research done about it, but I don't really know which exactly, how exactly they are affected by the light pollution. Now I have to check. Yes, but
we have another question by Mina Nabaza. The nesting season of most of the birds is annual. The organisation of shores into ports will further lead to light pollution too. What are the measures taken to overcome this and help in birds breed?
Thank you, Mina. That's a very interesting question. So I think that yeah, the problem is that it happens only during a very short period. So that means that some organizations and port authorities are not so well involved in, changing the light pollution regime, because of the fact that it's very limited short period when it is happening. So the fledging of Manx water, for example, happens only over 1 month, during only September. Sometimes it spreads a little bit further, but mainly it happens during September. But it also, creates some incentive. You don't have to worry about this light pollution most of the year. You can think about it only during September, only during 1 month of the year, when you can, do some special additional measurement to diminish its negative effects. I hope that answered the question. Yeah.
Yes, I believe it did.
And we have more questions to you.
Yeah.
So what are the consequences and threats of birds starting nesting earlier because of light pollution? Can it be dangerous? Can it threaten their existence and reproduction?
Yeah, so I definitely think so. Most of the birds or animals, organisms are trying to adjust to specific rhythm of other animals too. The other prey that is coming in certain periods of the time. So by starting earlier, it might mean that they are missing the most plentiful and very good reproductive part of the season. So it might be detrimental for them also in this way. Yes, definitely.
The questions are coming and coming. Rachel,
yes.
We have one.
Yes, again from EE2387. Has there been any study to determine why the population of these birds is not badly affected by this type of pollution? Because the presentation indicated that the impacts are minimal, less declining.
Yes. So the reason why Manx waters are not affected by the light pollution so much is because there is not so many birds grounding, simply. Like I'm saying, this is around 50 to 150, an average, I think, is 130 birds per year that are grounding in light polluted areas. So it cannot affect a population of seabirds that is 500,000, But there are other species that are grounding in lit up areas, other shearwaters and petrels that are affected by the light pollution. And light pollution is actually reported as one of the reasons why they are declining. I think the other important fact is that, in Malek, there is a very dedicated volunteer going around and making sure to pick them up, collect them, bring them, and release them back to the sea. So that means that there is actually not a lot of birds dying there, but there might be other places where there is no volunteers, no organization, no governmental support, and those birds are just, left alone. And if they are left alone, they're unlikely to survive. Yeah. While it's not affecting Manx waters, it definitely affects some other seabirds.
Thank you, Martyna.
Thank you. And the last question is that we know that for thousands of years, birds have acquired specific patterns, behavioral patterns, and they have been guided by the light of heavenly bodies to seek their natural habitat and specific nesting places. Are there any observation or research that traditional natural habitats are changing or shifting with the emergence of light pollution?
Whole habitats.
So, for instance, birds used to that used to be traveling to South America can no longer do this distance, overcome this distance, and settle around and change their habitat, natural habitats, closer to big city lights, or just accumulating around big cities. Does it have any influence on that?
Yeah, so I've definitely heard a lot of stories about some birds like storks or gulls that actually change their behavior right now and stop their migration, but not because of light pollution, because of the rubbish, garbage places where they can find a lot of food, or because of the better nesting locations for them on top of the houses instead of finding their nesting location on the ground on the islands. So yes, there is a movement of some birds. Some birds are stopping moving because of the increase in the changing their movement pattern because of the increase in the temperatures, for example. So in here would be the climate change to blame. So yes, but I've never heard about it in perspective of the light pollution.
Thank you, Martyna. Thank you so much for answering all the questions.
I can
It was very interesting.
By Yes Environmental Company.
Oh yes.
Oh yes. So Yes Environmental Company, you have your hand up.
Yeah. I was actually, I wanted to know these virtual island concepts. These days, we see that there are this urbanization of virtual islands coming up specifically in the Middle East. So is there a possibility that these bird species can be redirected to these areas for the purpose of breeding? Like, because here the virtual islands are specifically to have residential places, which has lesser amount of light pollution when compared to that of ports. So is there a possibility, or is there any study like that?
So water islands, what are these? Can you explain to me?
You can see this Palm Islands, the islands of the Middle East specifically.
Yeah, I understand now. Okay.
So, and they also have this concept of having mangrove forests. They are developing mangrove forests over there. So will that be beneficial? Can this be extended towards deviating these breeding birds which are being lethal or exploited towards the ports rather than these areas? Is it possible?
Yeah, so I think moving shearwaters and petrels is really difficult. I know. First of all, you would need to have ground for them to dig in, because they do live in burrows like rabbits. So I'm not sure if there is a lot of ground over there, but also moving a population and such a big population of seabirds to other location would be a very big endeavor, and I don't think it's a good and financially available option. So I don't think that will be good from this perspective. I know that, for example, some islands that historically had some birds, and right now for some reason they don't have them anymore, either because of the predation by rats or some other reasons. They are using tape recorders to lure these specific species back to this habitable island. So it is possible with some species to come back to the same island, but if to those newly made places, when it comes to shearwaters, petrels, oaks, I am not sure, and I didn't see any research about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for question.
So perhaps before we move on, we can take one more question and then we can move on to the next section. Do you think there would be a decline of bird population should there be no assisted adoption by people?
Yeah, so I think the biggest problem for the seabirds are overfishing and bycatch, and the changes in the prey distribution due to the climate change. So these are definitely the biggest problems. Obviously, light pollution comes into play in here. And if we are not going to change anything about that, it will just exacerbate all these other problems. So it will just add up to what we already are fighting with. And, you know, I really do strongly believe it's not that much to turn off the light. So, yeah. We could try working on it. Yeah.
Thank you, Martyna. I believe we can now move on to the next section. If you're both ready.
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes. We're looking forward.
Especially that I think that will answer some of your questions. So let's move on.
Okay. So.
Okay.
Now we're moving on to session 3. And we will adjust the presentation.
Cool. I hope you can see it well.
Yes.
Great. That's great. Thank you. So in this last part, I want to talk about the monitoring of the light pollution and how to diminish its negative effects on the wildlife. But first of all, we need to understand actually what light pollution is. So Longer and Rich in 2004 give a very good explanation saying that light, any light that alters natural light regimes in terrestrial or aquatic ecosystem is the ecological light pollution. So it includes chronically or periodically increased illumination, unexpected changes in illumination and direct glare. So it is not necessary for an animal to be actually next to the light pollution for the light pollution to have effect on this organism. Through the sky glow, which is the light going upwards and reflected from the clouds, actually animals in general can be affected from very far away. So what do we need to monitor? We need to look at all the lamps in the city, especially the street lamps. We need to look at the lights on the buildings and billboards and those in the ports. But also the lights that are more changeable and unexpected, like lights from vessels or cars. The sky glow that I mentioned before, and reflected light from the buildings, from the asphalt, and the reflected light from the water. Even flares from offshore oil platforms actually show that some birds are attracted towards it and die in those flares. So we need to look into that too. So what are the different ways in which we can monitor light pollution? Well, first of all, we have to think over what period do we want to investigate light pollution? Is it a change from year to year, or is it a daily change? And how big is the area that we want to see? Is it massive protected area, or maybe just our backyard garden, or maybe a river that we really care about? So for all of these different ways and locations, we have a different device and opportunity to monitor light pollution. So first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the satellite images. There are beautiful maps available from NASA from 2012 and 2016 that show the light pollution around the world. These maps, however, are not very precise. They have 500 meters resolution, so they're not very good for small areas. Better for this kind of endeavor would be to use a sky quality meter or dark sky meters. So sky quality meter is a device that costs around 150 euros, and you can measure the light and brightness of the sky and how the sky is polluted. Similarly, an app on your phone, dark sky meter, can be used for similar measurements. This dark sky meter also sends the data to a global database that is freely available. Actually, the data spans from 2006, and this data can be analyzed. Most of the people that collected those data live in Europe or in USA, so certainly more people in other regions would be welcomed. So, but these devices actually measure the light pollution of the sky. And if we wanted to measure the light pollution of the lamp, it would be not very useful. For this kind of need, we would have to use a lux meter. Lux meter is a small device that you can take to the field, and you can put it below a lamp and measure its light intensity. Unfortunately, however, lux meters are adjusted to the perception of a human being. So lots of different animals, as we discussed today, actually have different perceptions. So while for us this light might be very, very bright, for some kind of an animal it might be not bright at all, or the other way around. We think that this light is not too bright, but for an animal it's very bright and intense. So to measure correctly the wavelength and the intensity of the light pollution, we would need to use a spectrometer. These devices are usually found in the physics lab, so it's kind of hard to use in the field, but there would be a very precise device to use to measure light pollution levels. So maybe it's easier to use a camera. Digital cameras can measure the light intensity, can measure the color of the light, but also the spread of the light, which I think is very important because none of these previous devices would do so. With the camera, we can actually get a good idea about the light pollution. Unfortunately, after you make a photo that you have to really adjust, you then have to move it through a specific software. So while it might be something very useful for me, for a scientist, it may be not very approachable for citizens. So I think for citizen science, it would be the best to use apps on the phone or lux meter or sky quality meters. But let's see how to diminish the effects of the light pollution throughout this session. And thanks to your very insightful and interesting questions, I told you all about all the different ways in which light pollution might affect animals. And we discussed that most of the research and most of the information there are about animals that are affected by the light pollution and come to the light pollution, congregate around areas, lit up areas. But some other animals are actually avoiding the light pollution, and the reaction towards the light is a little bit more subtle and hard to actually detect. So I think any outside light should be used wisely. So I have good news. Once you turn off the light, you don't need to do anything more with it. That's it. It's unlike any other pollutant. This is it. Turn it off, and we are done. So that's why I think it's a good idea to turn off any light that you don't need in the garden or don't need in the driveway. If you need, you might use the motion-based solution for that to ensure that it will come up when you need it. But if you need the light pollution, you have to make sure that the light is pointed. I really like this photo. I found this lamp somewhere in the Netherlands. Somebody was clearly trying to avoid the spill of this lamp and trying to do a great job. The light pollution has to be covered from the top, but also sideways to ensure that it's pointed and it's only in the area where we actually need it, and not in the areas where it just disturbs other animals. So the next way of diminishing the effects of the light pollution is by using low intensity settings. I think that is self-explanatory. If you use not such a strong light, it doesn't go very far, so it doesn't affect a lot of animals. Finally, let's talk a little bit more about this problem of choosing the color of the light. First of all, I think the most important part is to try to choose a narrow spectrum of the light, not the full wide spectrum, because as we talked, lots of different animals would have to have different perception. So some of them would be more disturbed by blue light, and some of them will be more disturbed by red light. But it seems like a general consensus is that warm, more red, yellow colored lights are better for animals than those that are focused on blue or green colors. So finally, you should encourage others to do the same. Through our actions and conversations, we can really make a change and make sure that this less popular pollution is more well known. We are facing right now the climate crisis and plastic pollution. So while those might be bigger threats to animals than light pollution might be a little bit easier to solve. So artificial light is right now over the 1/4 of the land across the whole globe. It expands every year, in some regions even by 20%. Light pollution is affecting a lot of different animals, and satellites do not shows us that, you know, except from the fact that the light pollution is expanding, it's also changing, because we are changing from sodium lights to LED lights, which have this full broad spectrum. So we have to ensure that these kind of things come to the legislations. There are already some legislations telling us to diminish the light pollution. So, for example, in UK, it is an offense to have brightly lit up patio. But clearly, this is not enough. We have to change our mindset. Turning off the light will mean less cost, less electricity, and less emissions. So it is really a win-win. But we have this intrinsic human need of lighting up the night, and I think we explored this this ability to change night to the daytime far beyond its needs, and we need to stop this expansion to protect our environment. So today, to sum up, today we explored a lot of different ways in which animals are affected by the light pollution. We looked in detail into the groundings of shearwaters and petrels, and we discussed the different ways in which we can monitor and diminish the light pollution in cities, towns, and our backyard garden. So I have great many people to thank, especially my Oxnaf group, the volunteers in Malek, and people that helped me out on Skomer Island with my PhD. I would like to thank very much the GWCN for inviting me, for all the people that are listening, and for your amazing and very insightful questions. Here is a reference list, and if you have any more questions, I'm very, very happy to answer them in this last part. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martyna. That was a wonderful presentation and a wonderful section, of course. So I encourage each of you to ask any questions now by, of course, raising your hands or asking in our chat. And while we wait, I actually have one question for you, if that's okay, Martyna. It's interesting to see how governments around the globe address the problem of light pollution. Are there any examples of governmental initiatives other than Clean Neighbourhoods and Environment Act adapted in the UK, about which you mentioned in your presentation?
Yeah, so most of the legislation around the light pollution are in the places where there are observation for the sky. So it's mostly because of the astronomy that they are ensuring that some area is not so lit up. Other legislation, or maybe there is in European Union there is a guidance suggesting that it is better to use the warm light and less intense light, and take into consideration animals. But it is only a guidance. There's not much more into it, and I think we should rapidly try to do more about it and ensure, especially in those places where we know that the light pollution is affecting animals, to ensure that it doesn't grow, expand, and result in worse things.
Thank you, Martyna. Amelia, I believe you have a question on the chat.
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Would you like to read it out, or I can read it out if you like?
Yeah. Oh,
okay,
yeah, it's okay now. Yeah, I have unmuted myself finally. Yes, the question, are there any opportunities, the question from EE3287, are there any opportunities of looking into how light pollution affects certain plants, especially those that might die due to much light, using remote sensing?
Oh, using remote sensing. That's a very interesting question. I know that the plants are affected by the light pollution. This is definitely not too much of my area of expertise. I know that you can change the vegetation of the plants by using more light, but could you use remote sensing and have a look at how the habitat is changing, how the number of vegetation on specific vegetation is changing? I think it could be possible. I'm coming here from the area of looking into the effects of movement of animals, how it's affected by the vegetation. And I think there has been some successful uses of remote sensing on calculating the diversity and the amount of certain species in the area. I don't know how it would work when it comes to the light pollution, but I think it's definitely something worth looking into. So yeah, why not?
Thank you, Martyna. I have another further question, if that's okay. In underdeveloped countries, how easy would it be to implement legislation for light reduction or restriction at local levels?
Yeah, so I think because really turning off the light or using less intense light will result in less emissions and lower costs. I think actually it's a very good reason for some municipalities or governments to choose it. So I know that in my city, for example, they are leaving longer grass. So right now they do not need to cut the grass because they are leaving a big sign saying, "Oh, look, we are leaving the grass. Maybe it look messy for you, but it's great for the pollinators." And the same way, it could be light pollution could be approached in the same way. Let's diminish it. Let's make not so many lamps on a street. Let's make sure there is every other light, and let's write, this is for the animals that live around here. And yeah, and through those funds, when we collect some funds, we can also try to cover it, because I don't know how much it costs to cover the light pollution, but I don't think it's that much money, and that could ensure further diminish of its effect on the animals.
Thank you, Martyna. We have a comment from our colleague Joshua. I appreciate the detail and supporting evidence for all the ways light pollution affect both us and other animals. I think there are so many types of light pollution that is completely overlooked. Same in the area of noise pollution. The dynamics of all the types of pollution and how they interact to have an overall effect on communities is interesting but complex and requires attention and proper research and funding to back it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like I'm saying, the light pollution is just developing. I know that sound is another thing that they've been just looking into. And definitely this is another pollutant that we don't really think about. It just came to our lives and we didn't really decide a lot about it, but it's there right now. And yeah, more we research, more we realize how it affects our lives, but also animals.
Yes.
Thank you, Martyna. So I have another further question. The largest increase in light pollution is seen in developed countries. The cities are full of outdoor advertising, digital billboards, building lighting. When commercial aspects is involved, it's more difficult to achieve environmental deeds and actions. In your opinion, should the initiative come from the government, or should it be private sector be called into action as well?
Yeah, so I think that's a difficult question. I think the trouble is that how would you tell a company to just choose the lower setting on this billboard and make this billboard less visible, resulting in their advertisement being less effective? How would you explain that to the company, to their stakeholders? I don't think that would be an easy way of achieving it. That would be easier if the governments decide that this is the intensity of the billboard, you cannot go over it, or this is the light spectra that you can use on this billboard. I think this is the way to go forward, especially for the companies that they are not environmentally focused. Obviously, companies that are environmentally focused might inform the stakeholders, inform their people that buy something from them, that this is the reason, and I would definitely buy from them then.
Thank you for that. Would it be appropriate if education on light pollution was introduced in schools in order to get the community mindset, that culture change in? And how feasible do you think this would be across a global level?
Yeah, I definitely think that, you know, through our next generations, we can change a lot. And through talking to children and informing them about all these changes that we or previous generation introduced into their lives, this is the way to go. If they're informed, they will be able to make better decisions for their gardens and for their future companies and decisions. So definitely that will be an amazing step if we start to make sure that light pollution is part of the education. I agree. Yeah.
Without proper education and awareness, we can't fight the problem without light pollution. So what examples of advocacy and action are there in addition to volunteering?
Yeah, so I think in Canary Island, they do quite a lot of information about the grounding of the shearwaters and petrels, and there is a whole community involved. Similarly, in Maleg, there is a lot of people being informed, and they're also joining the volunteers in rescuing shearwaters and petrels. I think just through our small actions, you know, through the conversation, through talking about it, through ensuring that our light is safe, but also through bigger events like this, we can, you know, ensure that the education is spreading about light pollution.
Thank you, Martyna. I'd just like to remind everyone again in the audience, if they have any questions, please raise your hand, and you can also put them in our chat. And just while we wait, so what should be done to reduce unnecessary illumination in big cities?
So in the big cities, I think, first of all, it will be the best idea to try to cover the unnecessary spill, because changing the spectrum of the light might be actually quite expensive. So let's start from a simple thing like covering the light. And then the second thing is to ask yourself, do we need that much light? Do we need, you know, 5 lamps over 200-meter stretch, or do we need actually 2 lights or even 1? And this way, while maybe some lamps will be left for some time and there will be not used, we can diminish the cost of the light production, right? So I think this is the first thing that we can do in the big cities, covering and limiting the number of the light, and then thinking about the different spectra and the intensity.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And so based on those sort of answers and ideas that you've given, for the same sort of idea with an organization, if they wanted to start implementing light pollution reduction schemes or techniques from a top-down level, of course, in their company, but they didn't have much funding, where would you suggest that they might start?
Yeah, so I think they could start from just turning off unnecessary light. Then they can collect the funds, and then they can like cover their windows, for example, with some curtains. I think that would be very good. And then maybe buying a motion-based device to ensure that the light in some places is only when it's actually needed. So yeah, I think this kind of small actions, but also, you know, I think it's a good idea to just put a sticker next to the switch for the light. If you remind people that you have to turn off the light when you go out from a bathroom or other space, it also actually cuts the costs of the light. And I think that has been quite successful too. So this is another way where you can save the money. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Those simple ideas are very effective. So does anyone else have any comments or questions they would like to raise now? I believe we actually got another one in. So another question: wouldn't urban forestry be cheaper to minimize light pollution impacts as integrating tree planting with new developments?
Just a second.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
The question is from Seokwan. Thank you, Seokwan, for this question.
Yeah, thank you. So if we integrate the tree planting with new developments, yes, I'm trying to think how urban forestry is using the light pollution. But I also think that, for example, on the streets where you have quite a lot of trees and you have the lights next to them, these trees are going to catch light pollution, I guess. I didn't see the research, but you know, from personal perspective, I think trees actually could be very good at trying to ensure that the light pollution is not spreading far away. So yeah, why not? I think the urban forestry could be great to minimize the effects of the light. Yeah.
Thank you, Martyna. So we're now reaching into the final few minutes of our webinar today. So of course, if you have any questions, please do ask them now.
I'll send another notification in the chat.
Yeah, then we can just give it a minute or two.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question in now. Can light pollution be captured and used in a more proper way?
So I think it can be captured through just covering it. It's really that simple. It's nothing, you know, more difficult than that. Would you like to capture the light pollution to collect the energy? I am not sure if that is possible. Maybe. Yeah, I'm not an engineer, but I think the most important part and takeaway message is that covering light pollution, ensuring that it's in the right spot, pointing into the right place, and not spreading to the right, left, and up and down. That's the most important part with dealing with diminishing the effects of the light pollution.
Thank you, Martyna, and thank you everyone for all your great questions. We've now reached the end of our webinar. Our discussion today has highlighted many important factors and significant areas of concern around the issue of light pollution. As Martyna has shared with us today, the consequences and disturbance of artificial light can be seen across many species of animals, and it is today, not tomorrow, that we all need to begin working together to diminish these negative impacts on organisms. By applying some simple solutions such as monitoring techniques and by using light at home wisely, we as individuals can begin to see a reduction in light pollution and reverse these negative effects. Together, we can begin to witness real change in the fight against pollution. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank you all for attending this webinar. It has been a great pleasure to see participants from different organisations, including public and private sectors, from many different parts of the world, all coming together with a shared interest. to find and help implement best practices in order to develop sustainable solutions and to ensure an environment free from light pollution. Your participation in this webinar has been very much appreciated. I'd also like to sincerely thank Dr. Martyna Syposz, and I think you all agree it's been an honor and such a privilege to have Martyna here today with us to share her invaluable and enlightening research and expertise with us. Today, as each of you have come together to discuss research findings and ask questions, you've also expressed your interest, concern, and respect for this issue, and indeed respect for your colleagues around the globe. We are confident that we have come one step closer to ensuring a healthy environment for each animal and individual around the world, one where negative health outcomes will not be determined by light pollution. I'd like to leave you all with one thought, a quote by Vincent van Gogh. For my part, I know nothing with any certainty, but the sight of the stars makes me dream. We hope you have a great year ahead and the best of success in all your endeavours. Thank you all again for coming along to this webinar. Please do keep in touch and update us on your next activities, events, and research. Goodbye to you all, and thank you again so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Dr. Martyna. Thank you, everyone, for visiting.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the great questions. It was really a very interesting session. My brain is super interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martyna.